What's up, guys? This is Zadi again with Gate 7 International, coming to you with, unfortunately, yet another coaching analysis. It feels like I'm doing one of these every couple of months, especially in the last year and a half. But here we are. Olympiacos has signed a new coach, and his name is Carlos Carvalhal. Carlos is here to take on the job for Olympiacos. He's been all over the place. He's coached a lot of teams, and Greece is now his next destination. There's a lot of unhappy fans about this, more so than before Martinez was fired. So the goal of this analysis is going to be to determine what we could see at Olympiacos under the tenure of Carlos Carvalhal. So whether it's 1, 2, 3 months, the rest of the season, 2 years, we're gonna jump in and we're gonna see maybe what he has to offer Olympiacos and Olympiacos fans, what we could look forward to. Before we jump into that, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. Help us continue to grow the red and white community. The growth has been steady, especially across our channels. Follow us on social media. We are growing, growing, growing. Instagram's taking off, Facebook's taking off. We love your support. Thank you for helping us make this the biggest red white community that it can be. And don't forget, you can also become a Patreon supporter as well. For as low as $1 a month, you can get access to our WhatsApp group where we share a lot of information that we do not share on social media, extra data as well. And you can also get access to some extra episodes too. So check it out, patreon.com/gate7 international. Now, let's dive into the analysis, everybody. Let's check out what we can expect from Carlos Carvalhal. Let's check out some of the things that you guys have all been waiting to hear. First and foremost, we're going to look at some formations. With all the data that's available and all of the film that I've watched in the last couple of days, it indicates the indicator to me is that Carlos Carvalhal is going to run one of three formations with Olympiacos, or at least that's what we've seen the most of. Most likely, we will see a 4-4-2 based on the available personnel. This is the formation that he's used the most recently at Celta when he was in La Liga last year. And it's based off of a sturdy defense, direct play, noticeable quality on his counters. That's not just at Celta, that's anywhere he is. And it also relies heavily on overlapping wing backs. So the fullbacks are going to play a very, very, very important role in this formation. Now, while many of our audience did balk at the signing on social media, the second formation that he runs is a little bit more possession oriented. I know a lot of people when we brought up the initial formation discussion, we saw 4-4-2 on the counter. It pissed a lot of people off because that's not what we expected at Olympiacos. So when he runs a 3-4-3, it does seem to be a formation that is used in a more possession oriented game plan, we'll say. The 3-4-3 seemed pretty fluid and relied still on the performance of quality wingbacks and at least one pretty physical forward. This was done at the likes of Braga, Swansea, Sheffield, and if it came to be very defensive, the tactics would go to something like a 5-4-1, which was also done at Swansea, Braga, Sheffield Wednesday, in addition to Rio Ave and Celta. So in the formation, you could see a deep low block with quick transitions on the counter, things that could be very direct. So you saw those things both in the 4-4-2 and the 3-4-3. Again, the primary difference is in the 3-4-3. That seemed to be the formation that he uses in order to approach a game against smaller opposition, maybe where he expects to be dominating more possession. That's what we saw at Braga, and very limited times we saw the shape appear while he was coaching Celta Vigo. Now, in build-up, we see that open play in the 4-4-2 appears to be almost the exact opposite of what was advertised, at least when we were discussing Diego Martinez last summer. Diego Martinez was advertised as a very highly adaptable philosophy for a coach meant to be very possession based, quick tempo, pass and move, employed a high press, which could leave us exposed, which we've seen during the course of the season. The Spanish philosophy involving playing the ball outside of the back, attractive build up into the final third. This is something that we demand at Olympiacos. We want to see attractive ball. It's not enough just to win. We have to look good doing it. Attractive and offensive football. Well, where has that gotten us? Carlos Carvalhal's 4-4-2 system is going to play a lot more direct with less passes per possession, less entries into the final third, but a higher efficiency of attacks with shots. Not much build up out of the back, but more long balls. At least that's what happened at Celta. A lot more long balls from goal kicks, but you could see some live ball drops from the goalkeeper played up the middle instead of some of those long balls. Here and there, I also did see the ball get played out out the back on a once in a while in a dead ball situation, but primarily in live play. I'd see the ball get played out to some of those wing players. So don't panic. I I see a lot of people. I think it's some of that post Martin stress disorder, worried about some of these static 4-4-2s, the static lineup. I don't think that's going to be the case with this coach because he does have shapes in transition. If you remember the latter days of Pedro Martins, you might remember, especially the third season and fourth season, we did get very static in our attacks. We would see a lot of this overload where we would throw six guys on the front line, and then we would have two midfielders trying to play the ball and expose and find those areas where the defensive line has been overloaded. So I did see that with Carlos Carvalhal. I did see a lot of instances of like that 2-2-6 or 2-1-7 where you have a lot of players just sitting in the front offensive line over trying to overload that defense. Um, Carvalhal uses a lot of those shapes in transition, the 2-1-7, 3-1-6, you know, the different variations where you just have a lot of people in that front line to distribute and overload the defense. Ball playing is not always up tempo, or at the very least, it wasn't at Celta. And but again, it was direct and quite effective. We've actually talked about this not just with Ike, but with Panathinaikos as well. They don't play some of the prettiest possession ball. Well, Ike plays much prettier possession ball than Panathinaikos, but Panathinaikos is very effective entering the final third and getting shots on goal. Where I might worry you a little bit with what Carvajal does is the final third actions. So while he's pretty efficient and pretty good at getting the ball up through the final third, the majority of the opportunity creation in build up in this formation was in crossing. In fact, almost half of his shots on a per 90-minute basis tend to be from crosses. Everywhere he goes and he coaches, his teams are top 10 in terms of overall crossing volume. Now, in the 3-4-3, when we saw it in Braga or Swansea or Sheffield against weaker opposition, we did see more mobility. A packed midfield, possession-oriented philosophy was not unusual to see the system played with a higher line, so getting the guys forward or even a slightly higher press. The 3-4-3, although it requires a lot more from our fullbacks, makes it a little bit easier to transition to the defensive front. I'll cover that shortly when I get to the defensive side of things. But it will, like I mentioned, this does predicate a lot on the fullbacks, a lot of movement from them. But the 3-4-3 shape we'll see is going to involve plenty of runs from the inside from the wide forward positions, with width being created by those fullbacks. So doesn't matter what the formation is, the fullbacks are going to have a very important role one way or another. They're going to be expected to do a lot. The midfielders that are in the pivot are going to alternate getting forward while the other remains closer to the defensive line. With Braga in the more offensive approaches, both midfielders were actually afforded space to get forward, and one of the defensive three would take the responsibility of covering the gaps. This resulted in a plethora of occasions where the opposing teams would be smothered in their half. Now, Carvajal does not tend to run this when he's against superior opposition. So just bear that in mind. We're much more likely to see something that's a little bit more defensive. It's also worth mentioning at Braga, we did see more of the ball playing out of the back, as I mentioned earlier, than at Celta Vigo. So crossing will be a very important part of this offense. Don't expect to see too much of the ball being played out of the back, unless we're playing against maybe smaller teams. But I do expect to see a lot more long balls. And I do think that even though maybe this coach isn't the high press coach of the Spanish philosophy, I do think that in Greece he'll have no problem elevating that line and giving us a little bit more of a possession oriented, smothering offensive, up tempo type of feel to it. Moving on to the defensive shape, regardless of the formation that we are going to use in build up at least, the defensive shape is usually going to wind up in something of a 5-4-1 that you can see here that's on the screen. The forward and the front four, that midfield four, are going to be the ones doing the pressing and a lot of the legwork behind the ball, at least. And then that back line, that back five, which is going to include the three center backs, or maybe one could even be like a makeshift center mid that's just staying back there and using get forward, and then the fullbacks are going to join as well. That back line is going to be the one that's recovering the ball on a bad pass or following up on the pressing that's being done by the forward and then that line that's in the midfield. The rigid defensive structure of this 5-4-1 is very effective. Almost everywhere that Carvalhal has gone, it's been quite effective, especially since Swansea, at Rio Ave, at Celta, at Braga, very effective. Even at Sheffield Wednesday, it was quite effective as well. The defense was a core reason why he took them to the playoffs 2 seasons in a row. When he was in Celta, he had the 8th lowest overall expected goals allowed, which is very impressive considering that Celta had probably the lowest budget, was one of the teams with the lowest budget in La Liga. So the defensive formation itself will be pretty static. You're not going to see a lot of movement between the lines, but when absorbing pressure and in the defensive third, you're going to see, just because it's static, the players are very good and drilled about taking the spaces of the opposing players, smothering that, cutting off a passing lane, and picking up from the runners and the players that are doing the press. So another thing as well is when the ball does get into our final third, if the press hasn't been able to repel the attack before it's getting into our penalty area, the formation tends to see almost everybody get into the box. That seems to be a core thing. I mean, I couldn't see many times where we didn't the ball didn't see, or an opposing play trying to get across into the midfield wasn't greeted by 6, 7 players at least. So that seemed to be a requirement, was some of that defensive work at least. So again, defensively, I can't see how it doesn't improve. The system's going to be giving a lot of cover for the back four, and at least a lot more. We're not going to see a lot of that overexposure with that 4-2-4 from Diego Martinez. That's not something that's going to be allowed to happen under Carlos Carvalhal. So moving on, what does this mean for Olympiacos? We saw the formation. I gave you an idea of what buildup is like, and this is something I'll elaborate on with the defensive shape, how it's going to look in transition on the next live show. I'll give you guys some examples. I'll accept some questions, and I'll have my little board that you see here with the movable pieces to kind of give you guys ideas of where things will go depending on different types of pressure, shapes against. Of course, I will do that in the live show coming up, but for the sake of this, for the sake of having an idea of what the coach will do for Olympiacos, what does this mean for us? What can we expect to see with these different formations that have come? What does it mean for our club in Greece? And as it was with Diego Martinez when we did the analysis on him and when he first came in, the context with Olympiacos is completely different than what Carlos Carvalhal has experienced so far. There's a little hope that there can be some parallels based on what he did at Braga, and maybe he can adapt the possession style ball that he did at Braga to Greece. You see, since his coaching time at Swansea, Coach Carvalhal had a bit of a revelation in coaching. He actually took a year off, funny enough. I read an interview that he did, and he talked about this year off that he took after Swansea, and it changed his ideas. It changed his philosophy of coaching. Initially, his style was really, really rigid, and on the defensive side, it might still be, but on the offensive side, it's not anymore. He's stuck to formations, tactics surrounding the formations, and since then he's changed. He's modernized a lot more to what we see a lot of the more successful modern coaches talking about, which is the formation isn't the game anymore. It's about shapes and countering spaces. So this revelation has caused him a a huge change in the way he approaches games, moving focus from strict structure in not just defense but in build up, but moving towards the exploitation of spaces. So it seems that he's a coach that can adapt, or at least he can adapt now a little bit better than he could have before. Diego Martinez, though, was kind of supposed to be the same thing. So for whatever that's worth. Now, formation wise, I can't see how the 3-4-3 is going to work for us, especially before we get our winter additions. We neither have the depth at the center back position nor at the midfield position to pull this off. Maybe in the winter when everybody's healthy, we bring in some of the new additions we're talking about. Maybe we could pull this off, but right now I don't see how this could be something that we play with regularity. Um, we'd still be missing some important pieces in the midfield. Additionally, while El Kabi does the hard work that will be required of forwards in these systems under Carvalhal, we need a real number 9 in there that's going to command the spaces that are exploited by the number 9. Because I noticed at Celta and at Braga as well, at both teams, he had forwards that were pretty big guys, at least one. I'm not saying these guys were giants like Ibora, but I mean, they were like bigger guys capable of commanding those spaces. So it's going to require something that we don't have. Jovetic isn't somebody that's going to do it. Okabe isn't somebody that's going to do that. It's a different mold of forward that we need. And another thing about the 3-4-3 is even if we get all these pieces, even if we get everything, I don't see how this can work if Ndoye isn't a part of it, because Ndoye is really the only center back that we have that I could see being that bridge between the center back and the midfield area. Maybe we see a back three being more beneficial to Doy, who's been a little bit of a liability since playing center back. But we've talked about how he's really more of a defensive mid than he is at a center back. So maybe this is a great opportunity to get that out of him, because he's really the only person I could see this working for. I mean, Retzos is going to be more the ball player and, throw one of the other center backs in there to help solidify things, whether it's Biancon or Perozo when he gets healthy. But I can't see this back three working unless we repurpose a defensive mid, or if Ndoye is going to be used as that third center back that's kind of being the one that's moving in and out of the defensive line to cover the midfield. The 4-4-2, in my opinion, and its associated shapes, is more what I believe and more likely to what we're going to see as he jumps into things in the team, especially given what we've seen to date with Diego Martinez. So don't be surprised if in the short term we're going to see, and the long term, of course, a higher volume of crosses, more direct play into space with overload on the offensive ends. Don't be surprised. It might be a little bit of a deja vu with Pedro Martins the last 2 seasons. The major question here is going to be, how does Cosas Fortunis fit in this system? Based on what I've seen in the matches at Celta Vigo, even at Braga, Few times he played 4-4-2. Costa's not the ideal forward that is playing in the system. He's not. He's a different sauce altogether than something that Carvalhal is probably used to. Maybe Costa gets changed and plays more as like the little off of the striker, which we've seen some of the more skilled players, technical players, for Carvalhal playing in that role. I've seen it in both cases. Or maybe Carvalhal just kind of accepts, like Diego Martinez, is that look, Costa is our best producer offensively for sure, and I just have to figure out how to make it work around him. I don't know. We'll see how that works, but right now it's kind of one of those things where I'm wondering how Costas Fortuna is going to fit. I mean, he kind of has to fit because we're not getting any production really out of anybody else. Carvalhal is coming first and foremost to shore up the defense and bring some stability. It will result in a more defensive outlook on the field. I'm not going to deny that. But what I will say is have patience. Have patience, let the guy work, and let's just judge what he does on the field. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you guys and tell you that I really like this coaching signing. I'm excited to see what he's going to do because I'm not. I'm not excited. But after looking at the tape, I do believe that there's something to this guy. I do believe that there is a chance that based on what I've seen, that there's something that could translate here that we could like. I'm not saying it's a big chance. I'm not saying that it's a guarantee. No. Maybe he could surprise us. Maybe he could be the next Pedro Martins for us. But I see it being just as likely that he'll be in the same boat as Diego Martinez and doing nothing, getting fired 2 months later. Either way, it's a shit situation, guys. The situation we find ourselves with the club right now is it's awful. I'm not gonna lie. But it is what it is. This is the reality. We don't have any other options. Nobody wants to come here. He did. In that scenario, he has my respect. Whether he can do something with it and whether he can really earn my respect by getting us out of that, that's a different story altogether. But for now, we don't have a choice. We're in the situation we're in. Doesn't matter whose fault it is at this point. Back the coach, give him time to do something, and and let's see what he can do first. Let's judge him based on what we see on the field before we start calling for his head already. Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm really not looking forward to a seventh coach in less than 2 years. So keep the faith, guys. Support Carlos Carvalhal until we start seeing what he can do on the field. Yeah, I know it's a tough time right now to be an Olympiacos fan, but we're red and white in the good and the bad. Doesn't matter. I'll be going through, like I said, some more about Carlos Carvalhal in our live show. You'll get to see a little bit more. You can ask me some questions about it. But in the meantime, I hope you guys find this video to be insightful. I hope you got to learn a little bit more about Carvalhal. Maybe I gave you a little bit more hope. Maybe I didn't. Either way, I hope you got some good information out of this. And don't forget, give us a like. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and help us grow the community. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. Reach out to me on socials. You guys know where to find me. Check us out. Check out all the other work we have done if you haven't already. This is Gate 7 International by the fans for the fans. We'll see you next time.